I have never seen the sunrise like this before. It is magnificent.
The ancestors are watching over us today.
Your hands smell of fish, Faris, yet your nets are empty. How do you expect to feed anyone when the sea rejects you?
The small coastal village of Sirat Bay sat quietly between the restless sea and the rugged hills behind it. Life here was simple, shaped every day by the mercy and anger of the ocean. When the sea was calm, the villagers smiled. When it roared, the whole village learned fear. Salt filled the air, carrying the smell of fish, wet sand, and old stories that had been passed down for generations. On most mornings, fishermen would push out their boats before sunrise. The beach would glow with dim orange light, and the sound of waves washing the shore would fill the stillness. But today was different. Today, the peace of the village was cracked by the loud voice of Raheel, the wealthiest merchant in the region. Raheel walked along the shore wearing a spotless white kurta and a proud smile, as if he owned the entire coastline. He was known for his money, his influence, and his sharp tongue. Many respected him out of fear, but few loved him. His eyes were always searching for something to criticize, as if the world itself was beneath him. Near the edge of the water stood Faris, a poor fisherman, repairing a hole in his old fishing net. His clothes were worn, faded by years under the sun, and his hands were rough from the sea's hard lessons. Yet there was something gentle in his eyes, an honesty, a calmness, that made people trust him. Faris was a single father raising his young son, Amar, and despite his struggles, he carried himself with quiet dignity. Raheel spotted him and let out a sharp laugh. "Look at this old boat," Raheel said loudly, pointing at the small wooden vessel pulled up on the sand. "Does it even float anymore, Faris? Or does it only sit here to make the beach look poorer?" A few villagers froze, watching carefully. Some shook their heads. Others lowered their eyes. No one dared to challenge Raheel. Faris continued mending his net without lifting his gaze. His silence bothered Raheel even more. "And these nets," Raheel added, stepping closer, "are they older than you? Do they catch fish or memories?" His laughter echoed across the beach. Faris finally looked up, his eyes steady but soft. There was no anger in them, only patience. "The nets do their job," he said calmly. "They don't need to be beautiful." Raheel smirked, spoken like a man who has never seen better. But Faris did not respond. He simply returned to his work. His silence, steady and respectful, made him seem stronger than Raheel's loud words. This only deepened Raheel's irritation. He wanted Faris to feel small. Instead, Faris's calm presence made Raheel's arrogance look childish. A small breeze brushed across the shore, and Faris paused. He looked toward the sea, his expression changing slightly. The water today looked normal, soft waves rising and falling, but Faris felt something different, a tightness in the air, a quiet warning only someone who respected the ocean could feel. "The sea is changing," Faris murmured under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Raheel rolled his eyes. There he goes again, listening to the sea as if it talks to him. He walked away, still laughing, his footsteps leaving deep prints in the wet sand. Villagers exchanged glances. Some approached Faris out of concern. "Don't mind him," one said softly. "You know how he is." Faris gave a small smile. "A man's words show who he is. They don't change who I am." He lifted his gaze once more toward the horizon. The waves rose slightly, crashing with a sound that felt heavier than usual. Faris didn't understand the feeling completely, but he knew one thing for sure. The sea was watching, and sooner or later it would speak. As the morning sun climbed higher, the beach returned to its usual rhythm. But deep within the water, the wind began to shift, and the first hidden signs of the coming storm moved quietly beneath the surface. Faris felt it. The sea was preparing to teach a lesson, one that Raheel was not ready to learn. The next few days in Sirat Bay passed with a strange tension in the air. The waves crashed a little harder, the wind blew a little colder, and the sky stayed a little darker. The villagers whispered about it. Some thought it was nothing. Others felt fear growing quietly inside them. But life did not stop. Boats were still prepared. Nets were still repaired. Children still played along the shore. Among them was Zion, the teenage son of Raheel. Unlike his father, Zion did not walk around with pride or arrogance. His eyes were warm, curious, and kind. He enjoyed observing people, especially Ferris, whose gentle strength fascinated him. Whenever he watched Ferris at work, whether fixing nets, helping a neighbor, or pushing his boat into the water, Zion felt something shift inside him. It was respect, a feeling he never felt for his own father, no matter how much wealth Raheel possessed. One afternoon, Zion walked along the beach, his footsteps slow, his face thoughtful. He noticed Ferris and Amar pulling their boat onto the sand after a long morning at sea. Without thinking, he moved toward them. Amar, Ferris's young son, waved excitedly. "Zion, come look. We got so many fish today." Zion smiled and approached. Amar was a few years younger than him, playful and full of energy. Their friendship had grown quietly in hidden corners of the village, behind boats, near the rocks, or in the small forest near the beach. Neither of their fathers knew, and both boys preferred it that way. "Wow," Zion said, kneeling beside the basket of fish. "You're getting better than the older fishermen." Amar grinned proudly. Ferris watched the two boys, noticing their bond. He didn't say anything, but his heart warmed. He believed children saw the world more honestly than adults. They didn't see class or wealth, only kindness. But the moment was cut short. Raheel's voice sliced through the air like a sharp blade. "Zion!" The boys flinched. Ferris straightened. Raheel strode across the beach, his face twisted in anger. "What did I tell you?" Raheel barked, grabbing Zion's arm. "How many times must I repeat myself? You do not mix with these people." "These people," Ferris repeated softly, his expression unreadable. A few villagers stopped working and stared, sensing trouble. Zion pulled his arm away. "Father, they're not doing anything wrong. They're beneath us." Raheel snapped. Amar stepped back, eyes wide. Ferris placed a calming hand on his son's shoulder. "Zion," Raheel said coldly, "if you ever want to stand beside me, you must learn to stay away from people who live like this." Zion's throat tightened. "People who live like this," he whispered. "You mean people who work hard? People the village actually respects?" Raheel's face flushed with anger. "You will not speak to me like that." The wind pushed a sharp gust between them, lifting sand and making everyone squint. Ferris stepped forward gently. "Raheel Sahib," he said in a tone both humble and steady. "He is only a boy. Let him learn from everyone. The world teaches us through many hands." Raheel turned toward Ferris, insulted. "Save your advice for someone who needs it. I don't take lessons from fishermen who can barely feed themselves." His words stung the crowd. Zion looked embarrassed, not for himself, but for the father he had to stand beside. Ferris did not respond. He simply nodded, as if letting Raheel's cruelty pass through him, without resistance. His silence, once again, was stronger than anger. Raheel grabbed Zion's wrist again. "We leave now." But before he dragged him away, lightning flashed far off in the clouds, silent, distant, but unmistakable. The villagers looked up nervously. A whisper moved through the crowd. "A storm is coming. Worse than last season, they say. They say the sea is angry." Zion looked toward the horizon with worry. Amar did the same. Ferris felt his heart tighten. He'd sensed something days ago, but now it was becoming visible. Raheel scoffed. "Storm or no storm, it changes nothing. People panic too easily." He pulled his son away and walked down the shore, leaving behind a trail of anger and tension. Zion glanced back at Ferris and Amar, his eyes filled with apology. Ferris gave a small nod, as if saying, "It's not your fault, son." As the wind grew stronger, the waves began hitting the shore with louder, heavier force. Ferris closed his eyes for a moment. The sea was speaking again, not with calm whispers this time, but with warnings. And those who refused to listen would soon face the consequences. The sky over Sirat Bay shifted in slow, unsettling ways over the next 2 days. Clouds gathered like silent visitors, heavy and dark, shading the village from the usual bright sun. The wind, once playful and warm, turned cold and sharp, carrying a strange smell that only fishermen noticed, a mix of salt, metal, and danger. Ferris felt it the most. His years on the sea had taught him lessons no book could offer. He had learned to listen to the way the water moved, the way the birds flew, and even the way the air tasted. Today, everything felt wrong. Early morning, Ferris stood at the shore, scanning the horizon. Waves slapped the sand harder than usual, as if pushing a warning message onto the beach. The sky looked bruised, with long streaks of gray stretching across it. Amar tugged at his father's arm. "Baba, why does the sea look angry?" Ferris placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Because it is. Something is coming." The village bells rang in the distance as fishermen prepared their boats. Many were uneasy, throwing nervous glances at the sky. Some dared to whisper their fear. Others pretended everything was normal. Ferris walked from boat to boat, advising the men who trusted his instincts. "Don't go far today," he told Idris, an old fisherman. "Stay close to shore. Better yet, wait. The sea isn't safe." Idris nodded immediately. He had known Ferris long enough to respect his warnings. But not everyone felt the same. By midday, Raheel appeared at the dock, dressed in a bright blue coat that fluttered in the wind. His hair was neatly combed, but even he couldn't hide his irritation at the changing weather. "What are all these long faces for?" Raheel scoffed loudly, looking around. "It's just clouds. The sea has always had moods." Some villagers exchanged worried looks. Ferris stepped forward. "Raheel Sahib, this is not just a mood. The storm is coming faster than we think. No one should sail today." Raheel laughed in disbelief. "Are you serious? You expect me to cancel my trade trip because some fishermen felt the wind?" Zion, standing behind his father, looked torn. He had seen how the waves had changed. He had felt the trembling in the air. He quietly stepped closer to Raheel. "Father," Zion said softly, "maybe we should wait a few days." Raheel turned, offended. "Not you too. I've had enough of this nonsense. Business does not wait for storms." Ferris remained calm. "Raheel, the sea is warning us. You must listen." "I don't take orders from you," Raheel snapped. "And I don't fear the ocean like you do. Some of us have bigger lives to live." Ferris lowered his gaze, not because he felt defeated, but because he recognized the danger of arguing with a man whose pride blinded him. Raheel raised his voice, addressing the villagers. "I will sail at dawn tomorrow. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so, but don't blame me when you miss out on profit." Most villagers looked away, uneasy. None dared to follow him, but none dared to challenge him either. As Raheel walked off, Zion lingered. His eyes drifted to Ferris and Amar. He swallowed hard. "Is it really that bad?" Ferris nodded. "Yes, son. The sea is restless. You must convince your father." Zion sighed, fear flickering in his eyes. "I'll try." By evening, the sky grew darker. Thick clouds covered the last of the sun, turning the village into a place of shadows. The wind howled between the houses, lifting dust and making doors rattle. Mothers pulled children inside earlier than usual. Lanterns were lit before sunset. Ferris tied his boat securely and checked the rope twice. Amar watched him with worry. "Will Raheel still go?" Amar asked. "I hope not," Ferris whispered. "But some men hear only their own voice." Night fell heavily. The ocean roared, louder than before, waves smashing against the rocks with force that made even the bravest fishermen uneasy. Ferris didn't sleep. He sat at the doorway of his small hut, staring at the sea. He felt like the ocean itself was breathing with anger. At dawn, the storm had not fully arrived, but the signs were everywhere. The sky was dark, the waves were high, and the wind pushed against everything on the shore. Despite all this, Raheel stood at the dock, ready to leave. Zion stood beside him, pale and worried. "Father, please," Zion said for the last time. "Listen to Ferris. Listen to the sea." Raheel placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "We go. Now." Ferris watched from a distance, helpless. His heart felt heavy, as if tied to a weight sinking into the sea. The villagers held their breath. The storm had been patient long enough. And now it was almost here. The morning sky looked like a giant bruise spreading across the horizon. Thick clouds twisted together, forming dark shapes that moved quickly, as though the sky itself was pacing in anger. The wind stabbed at the villagers' faces, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of coming disaster. But Raheel, stubborn and proud, stood on the deck of his large merchant vessel, as if nothing was wrong. His clothes fluttered wildly in the fierce wind, yet he stood tall, pretending he controlled the sea with his confidence alone. "Untie the ropes," Raheel ordered. His voice was loud but shaky. Even he could not hide the tension in his tone. Zion stood beside him, his young face pale. His hands trembled as he gripped the railing. The waves slammed against the shore with so much force that water splashed onto the dock. "Father, please," Zion said softly. "Look at the sky. This is not normal." Raheel clenched his jaw. "We leave now. I've invested too much money to let fear stop me." Fear. The word hovered over them like a shadow. Zion wasn't afraid of the waves or the dark sky. He was afraid of his father's pride. Pride that had pushed him into the storm. Pride that refused to listen to the sea's warnings. Ferris watched from the beach, his heart pounding. Amar stood next to him, gripping his father's hand tightly. The villagers gathered quietly behind them. No one dared speak. No one dared interfere. The ropes were untied. The vessel drifted from the dock. Raheel grabbed the wheel with tense hands while Zion stood frozen beside him, watching the land grow smaller. The boat pushed through the rising waves. Within minutes, the sky darkened further, swallowing the early light. Wind screamed across the water. Even Raheel could no longer pretend everything was fine. The sea was ready. The first giant wave hit, like a slap of pure fury. It crashed against the hull of the vessel, sending a heavy tremor through the entire ship. Zion stumbled. Raheel gripped the wheel tighter, his eyes wide. "Hold on," he shouted, but the wind stole his words before they reached anyone. Lightning tore through the sky, bright and violent. Thunder followed like a mountain splitting in half. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. More waves rose around them, tall as buildings. The boat rocked dangerously, climbing one wave only to fall violently into the valley of the next. Rain poured down in thick sheets, blinding them. Zion grabbed the railing, gasping for breath as cold water drenched him from head to toe. His heart raced in his chest like a trapped bird. "Father, turn back," he cried. Raheel tried. He truly tried, but the sea refused to obey him. His boat was nothing compared to the storm's strength. Every time Raheel moved the wheel, the waves shoved the vessel in the opposite direction. It was as if the sea was done listening to him, as if it had decided to show him the limits of his power. A monster wave rose ahead, taller, darker, more violent than the others. It was a wall of water coming straight for them. Zion screamed. Raheel's breath caught in his throat. The wave crashed onto the deck with unstoppable force. Water swallowed everything. The boat tilted dangerously, with cracking as if the storm was ripping it apart with its bare hands. Zion lost his grip and slammed onto the deck. Raheel felt his knees. Pain shot through his leg, but he struggled back up, reaching for his son. "Zion!" he shouted. Another wave hit. The vessel groaned under the pressure, its structure breaking piece by piece. Wooden crates, ropes, barrels. Everything was washed across the deck like toys. Zion tried to crawl toward his father, but the water was too strong. It pulled at him, dragging him inch by inch toward the edge. Raheel saw it happen. His chest tightened painfully. His pride, his wealth, his status, all of it vanished in a second as he watched the most precious thing in his life slipping away. He lunged forward, but the sea was faster. A violent wave crashed between them, choking Zion's cries and knocking Raheel back. Raheel hit the mast, pain exploding through his back. He fell onto the slippery deck, helpless. Through the roaring water, he saw Zion being pulled toward the edge. "No!" Raheel yelled, his voice breaking. Zion's hand reached out, but the next wave swallowed him completely. In a heartbeat, he was gone. Raheel dragged himself forward, screaming his son's name. Tears mixed with the rain on his face. He clawed at the deck, trying to stand, trying to fight the sea, but his strength was no match for nature's fury. Another giant wave smashed the vessel. This one ended it. The ship cracked apart, breaking into large wooden pieces. Raheel was thrown into the freezing water. The ocean wrapped around him, crushing him with its cold, merciless grip. He gasped for air, fighting to stay afloat among the wreckage. He searched the water desperately, calling for Zion again and again. No answer. Only the storm's roar replied. For what felt like hours, Raheel clung to a piece of floating wood, his body shaking from cold and fear. Lightning flashed, showing glimpses of broken boards scattered across the sea. The storm raged through the night, and then, slowly, painfully, it began to calm. The waves softened, the wind weakened, the thunder drifted away, leaving the ocean breathing heavily, like a tired beast. Morning arrived. The sky turned pale gray. The sea was quiet again, too quiet. Raheel lay on a small stretch of floating wreckage, barely conscious. His eyes opened weakly, his mind blurry. He looked around. His ship was gone. His wealth was gone. His pride was drowned. And Zion, his son, his heart, was nowhere to be found. Raheel broke down. His cries were soft, empty, lost in the endless sea. Nature had passed its judgment. The sea had taken what Raheel feared losing most, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Pride had a price, and Raheel had paid for it. The morning sun rose slowly, its gentle light touching the broken pieces of Raheel's shattered vessel, drifting across the sea. The world looked calm now, almost peaceful, as if pretending nothing terrible had happened just hours earlier. But peace did not reach Raheel's heart. He lay sprawled on a broken plank, his body cold and weak. The taste of salt burned his lips. Every breath felt like it scraped his lungs. But none of that pain compared to the emptiness ripping through him. His son was gone. The storm had taken Zion, swiftly, mercilessly, and the memory of that moment replayed in Raheel's mind like a blade cutting over and over. Zion's outstretched hand, the desperate cry drowned by the waves, the final flash of his terrified face. Raheel closed his eyes, tears spilling silently. For the first time in his life, he wished he had listened. Not to the sea, not to the villagers, not even Ferris, but to his son, to the fear in Zion's voice, to the truth in his trembling words. But wishes meant nothing now. Back on the shore, Ferris and the villagers searched the horizon with anxious eyes. The night had been long and restless. No one slept. The storm's rage had shaken every heart in the village. Ferris stood at the beach's edge, his shoulders heavy with fear. Almar clung to his father's side, refusing to go home even after the rain stopped. "Baba, will they come back?" he asked, his voice small. Ferris gently placed a hand over his son's head. "I don't know, Almar," he whispered, "but we will not stop looking." Dozens of villagers stepped forward to join the search. Small boats were pushed into the water, their wooden frames creaking as men climbed aboard with lanterns, ropes, and faith. They spread across the coastline, scanning the waves for any sign, the boat, the passengers, anything. But the sea kept its silence. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, warming the sand and drying the remnants of the storm. Yet the ocean stayed eerily quiet. Ferris's heart tightened. Something was wrong. Far out on the open water, Raheel forced himself to move. His muscles screamed in protest, but his mind refused to surrender. "Zion," he whispered, his voice broken, "please answer me." He pushed the plank forward, using his hands to paddle clumsily. Each movement sent pain shooting through his body, but the fire in his chest, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, his son was still alive, kept him going. He scanned the endless water, calling out again and again. Only the waves replied. The guilt, heavier than the sea itself, dragged at him. Every moment of pride, every harsh word, every time he ignored Zion's fear. Now those memories felt like weights pulling him deeper and deeper into despair. Raheel tilted his head up and screamed into the open sky. "Take everything from me, but give me back my son." His voice cracked. His body trembled. The ocean gave no answer. Still, he didn't stop searching. As the sun moved toward the afternoon, a villager in one of the search boats spotted something in the distance, a small piece of broken wood rising and falling with the waves. The man squinted, leaned forward, and then gasped. "Ferris! Ferris!" His shout echoed across the water. Ferris jerked his head up, heart racing. He steered his boat toward the sound. As he approached, he saw a figure clinging weakly to the plank. Raheel, barely conscious, barely holding on. Ferris's breath caught. He and two men pulled Raheel aboard carefully. Raheel collapsed into Ferris's arms, coughing seawater, shaking uncontrollably. "Zion," Raheel whispered immediately, his voice nothing but a broken thread. "Ferris, my son! Please, find him." Ferris felt his own heart crack. He gripped Raheel's shoulders firmly. "We will search every corner of the sea," he promised. "We won't stop. I swear." Raheel nodded weakly, his eyes filling with tears, not of strength, but complete defeat. He was a man crushed by regret, drowned in remorse long before the waves touched him. The boat spread out again, this time wider, deeper into the open sea. No one spoke. Every man felt the weight of the mission pressing on their hearts. Amar, waiting on shore, stared at the horizon, praying silently for his friend. Minutes turned to hours. The sun began to lower, and still no sign of Zion. Raheel sat in Ferris's boat, wrapped in a blanket, trembling. He stared endlessly at the water, whispering his son's name as if each syllable might bring him back. "Zion, Zion, please." Ferris placed a hand on his friend's back. "Don't lose hope," he said softly, though even he felt a sharp sting of doubt. The sea, calm now, hid its secrets beneath a smooth surface. A vast, silent, merciless mirror. As the last rays of daylight touched the water, Ferris called out to the other boats. "We return for now, but at dawn we search again." The men nodded, heavy-hearted. Raheel closed his eyes as tears rolled down his face. The image of Zion slipping beneath the waves haunted him with every breath. His pride had led them into the storm. And now, all he wanted was one more chance to hold his son. One more chance to say he was sorry. The night settled over the village, quiet and painful. The search for Zion had begun, but the sea was a deep, endless place, and hope was growing thinner by the hour. The night after the search was the heaviest the village had felt in years. Sirat Bay, usually alive with children's laughter and fishermen songs, was wrapped in a silence so deep it seemed to swallow every sound. Even the waves washed onto the shore gently, as if afraid to disturb the sorrow thickening in the air. Lanterns flickered outside small clay homes. Shadows danced on the sand. Groups of villagers gathered quietly, speaking in low voices, their faces pale with worry. Inside Ferris's home, the mood was somber. Amar sat on the edge of his bed, hugging his knees to his chest. His eyes were red and tired, though he tried his best not to cry. He didn't want to make things harder for his father. Ferris sat across the room, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tightly. His head hung low. He felt responsible. Responsible for warning Raheel. Responsible for feeling the sea's danger and not stopping him harder. Responsible for coming back with only one man and losing the boy. Every breath felt too heavy. After a long silence, Amar finally looked up. "Baba, will Zion come home?" Ferris swallowed, his throat tight. He wished he could answer with confidence. He wished he could promise the world to his son. But the truth was a storm inside his own heart. "I don't know," he whispered. "But the sea, sometimes it tests us. Sometimes it takes, and sometimes—" his voice broke. "Sometimes it returns what we least expect." Amar nodded slowly, though fear still shaded his eyes. He slid off his bed and leaned against his father. Ferris wrapped an arm around him, grateful for the small comfort. Outside, the villagers held a quiet meeting near the shore. Old fishermen, strong men who had faced countless storms, stood with defeat written across their faces. Elder Suleiman, one of the oldest men in Sirat Bay, spoke first. His voice was rough but steady. "We continue the search in the morning. As long as there's a chance, no matter how small, we do not give up." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. "But we must also accept," Suleiman added, eyes heavy, "that the sea has moods we cannot control. We warned Raheel." Ferris warned him. The signs were clear. Someone sighed. Someone else wiped their eyes. Another man said, "Ferris risked his life bringing Raheel back. If he had not gone out again after the storm, both would be lost. The villagers nodded. Their respect for Ferris deepened. But the question hanging in every heart was the same. Where is Zion? A young woman whispered. He was such a gentle boy. Another added, he didn't deserve this. Children never deserve pain created by the pride of adults. The truth stung everyone who heard it. At Rahil's home, the atmosphere was different. It was darker, fuller of regrets. Rahil sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, unable to stop trembling. His face was pale, his eyes swollen from crying. His servants tried to comfort him, but nothing they said mattered to him now. He kept replaying the storm in his mind, the mistake, the arrogance, the moment he ignored Ferris's warning, the moment he ignored his own son's fear, a mistake he could never erase. A servant gently placed a cup of warm tea beside him. "Sahib, you should drink something." Rahil didn't even look at it. He simply stared ahead, unseeing, as if the sea still stretched before him. "Zion is gone because of me," he whispered, "because I thought I was greater than the sea, greater than the warnings." His voice cracked, raw and broken. "I mocked Ferris. I mocked the ones who understand the water, and now I have nothing." Tears fell freely again. "You still have a chance," the servant said softly. "The village will search again tomorrow." Rahil shook his head. "Why would they help me? After everything I said, everything I did." He buried his face in his hands. But he didn't know, didn't understand, that the villagers weren't helping for him. They were helping for Zion, for the child, for the innocent soul lost to the waves. Later that night, Ferris stepped outside to breathe the cool air. The moon hung low, dim behind a veil of clouds. The sound of the ocean echoed softly, no longer violent, but still holding its secrets. Amar followed him silently, bare feet touching the cold sand. "Baba," he said quietly, "the sea feels sad." Ferris looked down at his son, surprised by the simple yet profound words. "Yes," he said, "tonight it does." Amar's small hand slid into his. "Do you think the sea is sorry?" Ferris paused. "I think the sea does what it must. And sometimes we suffer for what we don't listen to." Amar's eyes glistened. "I miss Zion." "So do I," Ferris whispered. The two stood together, staring at the dark waves. Behind them, the villagers drifted back to their homes, heavy-hearted. Some prayed. Some cried quietly. Some sat awake through the night, unable to rest knowing a boy was still missing. Sirat Bay was united in grief. But grief can either break a village or bring it together in a way it has never been before. And deep beneath the water's calm surface, somewhere far beyond what human eyes could see, the sea held the next chapter in its silent, mysterious hands. The next morning came slowly, as if even the sun hesitated to rise over Sirat Bay. A dull gray light spread across the sky, touching the roofs of small homes and the restless waves that whispered along the shore. The search boats were already prepared. Men gathered with ropes, lanterns, and long poles, their faces tight with exhaustion and fear. Yet they were determined to try again. But Rahil was nowhere to be seen. He had locked himself inside his home through the night, sinking deeper into a darkness that felt heavier than the storm itself. Inside, the house that once displayed wealth and pride now felt like a prison. Rahil sat near the open window, staring at the sea with empty eyes. His clothes were still wet from tears, his hair uncombed, and his face pale from sleepless hours. He didn't move, not even when footsteps approached. His loyal servant, old Kareem, stood in the doorway with hesitation. The man had served Rahil for decades, but today he looked at him with both pity and worry. "Sahib," Kareem said softly, "the villagers, they are beginning to search again. You should come." No response. Rahil didn't even blink. His hands rested limply on his knees, shaking slightly. Kareem stepped closer. "Sahib, please. Your son needs you. Even if he is out there somewhere, cold, hurt, you must try." Rahil's lips trembled. His voice was thin, barely a whisper. "Why would they want me there? Why would they allow me to walk beside them after everything I've done?" Kareem knelt beside him. "Because this is not about you, Sahib. It is about Zion, the boy with the kind heart, the boy everyone loved." Rahil's jaw clenched, but the pain in his eyes only deepened. "I don't deserve to search for him," Raheel said. "I took him into that storm. I thought I was stronger than the sea. I ignored every warning." His voice broke. Every tear he shed on that boat, his fear, and still I made him stay beside me. Kareem placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then walk today for him, not for yourself." A long silence stretched through the room. Outside, the distant voices of the villagers drifted in. They were calling names, giving instructions, preparing to spread out along the coast. Finally, Raheel stood, but when he tried to take a step, his legs almost gave out. Kareem quickly caught him. "You can do this, Sahib." Raheel nodded shakily, because even broken fathers must try. As Raheel approached the shoreline, a wave of silence fell over the villagers. They paused their work and watched him carefully. He looked fragile, a shadow of the proud man he once was. Some villagers felt pity. Some felt anger. Some felt both. Ferris stepped forward first. He met Raheel's eyes, and for a moment, everything, the insults, the mockery, the harsh words, hung between them like a ghost. Raheel's lips trembled. "Ferris." He couldn't finish. The shame pressed down on him like a giant stone. But Ferris placed a hand on his shoulder. "No father should face this alone," he said gently. "Your grief, I understand it." Raheel's breath hitched, tears filling his eyes. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you help me after everything I've done to you?" Ferris looked toward the sea, then back at the broken man before him. "Because this isn't about the past. It's about a boy who still has a chance. And because pain teaches us more than pride ever will." Raheel covered his face as sobs escaped him, loud, painful, almost childlike. He fell to his knees in the sand, the weight of his guilt crushing him. Villagers watched, moved by the sight of a powerful man finally surrendering to the truth he had run from all his life. Some stepped forward with quiet sympathy. Others lowered their heads in respect, knowing what it meant for a father to break so completely. After a few moments, Ferris helped Raheel stand. "We start here," Ferris said, pointing toward the far side of the shore. "Amar and the younger boys are helping search closer to the rocks. The older fishermen are taking boats toward the open water." Raheel nodded weakly and followed Ferris. Each step felt like walking through mud. His mind replayed the moment he lost Zion, his son slipping under a wall of water, his small hands reaching, his terrified cry drowned by the storm. Every memory stabbed at him. At one point, Raheel stopped and squeezed his eyes shut. "Ferris, what if the sea has taken him?" Ferris placed a steadying hand on his back. "The sea does not take without purpose, and it does not always take forever." Raheel looked up, hope flickering for a second before fading again. "How do you stay so strong?" "Because I must," Ferris answered. "For Amar, for the village, for myself, and today for you too." Raheel lowered his head, humbled beyond words. As the days stretched on, villagers spread across the coastline. They searched the rocks, the shallow waters, the coves where driftwood often washed up. The sun climbed higher, but still no sign of Zion. Raheel grew weaker with every hour, physically and emotionally. At one point he leaned against a rock, gripping it tightly as waves lapped his feet. "I can't breathe," he whispered. "It feels like the storm never ended." Ferris turned to him, his face full of calm strength. "Storms end, Raheel, even the ones inside us, but you have to keep walking through them." Raheel took a shaky breath, and he kept walking, because even the most broken hearts must try, especially when hope, however tiny, still exists somewhere beyond the waves. Little did he know, the sea was not done with him yet, and neither was fate. The night arrived once again, draping Sirat Bay in a blanket of quiet sorrow. The sky was darker than before, as if the stars themselves were hiding out of respect for the boy who was still missing. The villagers returned to their homes slowly, exhausted and hearts heavy. Another day had passed with no sign of Zion. Only the sea kept moving, its waves rolling gently under the silver moonlight, calm, almost thoughtful. Ferris, however, did not rest. He sat on the shore long after the others had gone home. Amar had begged him to sleep, but Ferris had only kissed his son's forehead lightly. "Rest, Beta," he whispered. Your Baba will return soon. But Ferris could not sleep. Something inside him would not let him. It was a small, fragile feeling, like a thin flame refusing to be blown out by grief. Hope, and hope, no matter how small, was enough to keep him awake. Near dawn, as the first pale light crept into the sky, Ferris stood. His body was tired, but his heart was strangely alert. He took his old lantern, still dimly flickering, and began walking along the far eastern stretch of the beach, an area most villagers did not bother searching anymore. He walked with slow, steady steps, listening to the sea, watching the sand, reading the patterns the waves left behind. Ferris had spent his life studying these signs. He knew when something was out of place. After a few minutes, he stopped suddenly. There, on the wet sand, he saw something small caught between seaweed and broken shells, a piece of fabric. Ferris bent down, picked it up, and stared at it in shock. It was Zion's scarf. The same scarf the boy had worn the day he boarded his father's boat. The same scarf Amar had admired because of its blue and white stripes. Ferris's heartbeat quickened. His breath caught in his throat. "Zion," he whispered. He looked toward the sea, then down the coastline, and then he began to run. The sun was rising slowly, painting the sky with soft pink and golden streaks. The waves glowed under the early light, rolling calmly after the storm's long fury. Ferris followed the trail. Bits of broken wood, tangled nets, and scattered debris that the sea had pushed toward the far end of the bay. Something urged him forward, a pull he couldn't explain. Then, in the distance, he saw a shape lying on the shore. A small shape. Ferris froze, the world going silent around him. His hands shook. His breath stopped. "Ya Allah," he whispered. "Please, please." He ran. When he reached the body, he dropped to his knees so fast the sand splashed beneath him. His hands trembled violently as he turned the boy over, and then he saw the face. Pale, still, eyes closed, but alive. Zion. Ferris let out a choked sound, half sob, half gasp, as relief flooded through him. He touched the boy's cheek, then pressed his ear close to Zion's chest. A heartbeat, weak but steady. "Thank you," Ferris breathed. Tears fell onto the boy's forehead. "Thank you for sparing him." He gently lifted Zion into his arms. The boy's body was cold, heavy with exhaustion. His clothes were soaked with seawater and sand, but he was breathing. Ferris wrapped him in his shawl and held him close, warming him with his own body heat. Slowly, Zion's eyelids fluttered. His voice was barely audible. "Uncle, is my father?" Ferris brushed wet hair from the boy's forehead. "You're safe now, Beta. Don't speak. Save your strength." Zion's lips quivered, and a small tear slid down his cheek. But before he could say more, he drifted into a gentle, exhausted sleep. Ferris held the boy tightly and stood, his legs shaking from relief and emotion. He looked toward the village, still quiet, still waking. "It's time to take you home," Ferris whispered. He began walking, each step filled with gratitude and disbelief. The cold morning wind brushed past him, but it no longer felt cruel. The sea behind him rolled quietly, almost peacefully, as if it had made a final decision, as if it had chosen mercy. By the time Ferris neared the village, the first few early risers stepped outside their homes. A fisherman rubbing sleep from his eyes froze when he saw Ferris approaching with someone in his arms. His eyes widened. "Is that?" Ferris found the boy. His shout echoed across the beach, breaking the silence. Doors burst open. Villagers spilled out, stunned, eyes wide, hands covering mouths in disbelief. A wave of emotion swept the crowd. Relief, joy, shock, tears. Amar ran toward them, stumbling in the sand. "Baba? Baba, is it Zion?" Ferris knelt so Amar could see. The boy gasped, tears spilling instantly. "He's alive," Amar whispered. "He's alive." Ferris nodded, voice breaking. "The sea returned him to us." Just then, someone shouted behind crowd, "Raheel! Bring Raheel!" And somewhere inside his home, the broken father who feared the worst felt something, like a spark of life returned to his heart. The miracle he begged for was waiting just outside his door. The village of Sirat Bay was alive with movement and emotion as Ferris carried Zion back to safety. The boy's pale, tired face now glowed faintly under the warmth of the early morning sun. Ammar ran beside them, tears streaking his sand-dusted cheeks, while the villagers followed behind, cheering quietly but unable to contain the raw relief flooding through them. At Rahil's home, the broken merchant sat on the floor, his head bowed, his hands trembling. He had heard the distant cries, the shouts, and finally, the undeniable proof of hope. Something was coming, something that could restore the one thing he feared most losing. "Zion alive?" he whispered to himself, his voice thick with disbelief. A sudden knock at the door broke his trance. Kareem entered, eyes wide, pointing toward a crowd gathering outside. "Your son," Kareem said softly. "Ferris has him. He's safe, Sahib." Rahil froze. His heart felt like it might leap from his chest. Slowly, he rose to his feet, legs unsteady, body trembling not from cold, but from the weight of shame, guilt, and hope combined. He stepped outside. The villagers parted slightly, leaving a narrow path down the sand. There, cradled in Ferris's arms, lay Zion. His small body looked fragile, almost unreal in the soft morning light. Rahil's voice broke before he could stop it. "Zion." The boy stirred, blinking slowly, barely recognizing his surroundings. But when his eyes landed on his father, a mixture of relief and cautious hope flickered across his face. Rahil's knees buckled, and he fell to the sand. The proud, arrogant man of yesterday was gone. All that remained was a father, trembling, ashamed, desperate to make things right. Ferris approached, careful and calm, setting Zion down gently. The boy clung to Ferris's hand, still weak from the storm, but safe. Rahil crawled forward, his eyes locking with Ferris's. I am sorry," he whispered, tears streaming freely now. "I mocked you. I insulted you. I ignored your wisdom. I put my son in danger. His voice broke completely, his hands covering his face. "I was a fool, a proud, blind fool." Ferris knelt beside him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Rahil, your mistakes are heavy, but they can teach more than your pride ever could. Today your son is alive. Let that guide you." Rahil looked up, his eyes red but attentive. He met Ferris's calm gaze, realizing for the first time in his life that humility carried more weight than wealth, and kindness more power than arrogance. Zion, gathering strength, spoke softly but firmly. "Father," the sea didn't choose wealth or pride. It chose Ferris's heart because he listened. You must change, not punish yourself. We can only move forward together." Rahil swallowed hard, nodding. He reached out for his son, wrapping him in a trembling, desperate embrace. Zion clung to him, the warmth of father he had feared losing filling the gaps left by the storm. Ferris stepped back, allowing the reunion, though he remained nearby, silent but vigilant. He had always believed that strength came quietly, through action and care rather than words or mockery. Today, the sea had confirmed it. The villagers watched in awe. Some wept quietly. Some whispered about the lessons learned. Even Ammar, still clutching his father's hand, felt the relief and the subtle shift in hearts around him. Rahil rose slowly, holding Zion close. His voice was steady now, carrying a new weight. "I vow to change, to live humbly, to honor the wisdom I once scorned. I will help the village, listen to those who know the sea, and never again let pride blind me." The villagers nodded quietly, hearts warming at the sincerity in his words. Rahil had been broken, humbled, and reborn in a single moment of fear, grief, and gratitude. Zion smiled faintly, looking at Ferris. "Thank you for saving me." Ferris nodded, his own voice gentle. "The sea has its ways. It teaches, it tests, and sometimes it chooses mercy. Today, it allowed you to live. Remember its lesson." Rahil knelt beside them, tears still falling, but now they were mixed with gratitude. "I will honor this lesson every day of my life." The villagers began to return to their daily lives, carry with them a story of humility, forgiveness, and redemption. But for Rahil, Zion, Ferris, and Ammar, the bond formed in the shadow of the storm would last forever. The lesson of the sea had been learned. It does not favor wealth, arrogance, or pride. It chooses hearts that are willing to listen, to respect, and to act with courage and kindness. And Raheel, for the first time, understood what it truly meant to be a father, a man, and a part of something greater than himself. The days after the storm passed slowly, leaving Sirat Bay washed clean, but forever changed. The village hummed quietly with recovery. Boats repaired, homes patched, nets mended. Yet beneath the surface of everyday life, a deep lesson lingered, etched into every heart that had faced the wrath of the sea. Raheel, once proud and unyielding, had transformed. No longer did he flaunt his wealth or demand respect from the villagers. Instead, he moved among them with humility, helping repair boats, sharing food, and listening to the wisdom of men he once mocked. His hands, once polished and clean, were now calloused from labor. His heart, once heavy with pride, now carried gratitude and understanding. Every morning, Raheel watched the sea with a new reverence. He had learned that power meant nothing against nature, and that true strength came from respect, patience, and compassion. The sea had chosen Ferris's heart to protect his son, but in doing so, it had also given Raheel a second chance to be a better father, a better man, and a better member of the village he had once looked down upon. Zion and Ammar no longer hid their friendship. They ran through the streets and along the docks, inseparable, laughing in the sunlight, free from the shadow of social divisions. Their bond became a symbol to the villagers, that kindness and courage could unite even those born into different worlds. Ferris, quiet as ever, resumed his life as a fisherman, but his role had subtly shifted. He became a teacher, not just of the sea, but of wisdom, patience, and courage. One morning, he took Zion by the hand and walked him to the edge of the bay. "Look at the waves," Ferris said softly. "Listen to them. The sea speaks in ways only those who pay attention can understand. It does not choose based on wealth, pride, or power. It chooses those who respect it, who act with truth in their hearts." Zion nodded, feeling the weight of the lesson in his chest. The storm had taken him to the brink of life and death, but it had also shown him what truly mattered: humility, courage, and the strength to care for others. Raheel watched from a distance, a mixture of awe and gratitude filling him. He had seen firsthand what arrogance could cost, and now he witnessed how wisdom and courage could protect and guide. Each time he saw Ferris tending his nets or guiding the boys or helping the villagers quietly without boast, he remembered the sea's choice, and he knew his life had been forever altered. The village thrived once more, stronger and more united than before. Lessons were whispered to children, repeated in every home. The sea rewards those who listen, who act with humility, and who embrace compassion over greed. Raheel never forgot. Every day, he tried to live in a way that honored that lesson. And sometimes, when the waves lapped softly against the shore, Raheel would stand silently, watching the horizon. He would remember the night the storm struck, the night he lost everything, and the night Ferris saved Zion. The sea had chosen, not wealth, not power, not pride. It had chosen hearts willing to listen. It had chosen purpose. And in that choice, the village, the fathers, and the children learned a truth they would carry forever. Respect, courage, and kindness are more powerful than any storm. Raheel once mocked the poor fisherman, but in the end, the sea had chosen Ferris's heart to protect his son, and in doing so, it had changed the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The waves rolled on, indifferent yet purposeful, carrying the timeless message across the sands of Sirat Bay. The world belongs to those who listen, who act with humility, and who open their hearts to the truth that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in wealth, but in kindness. The storm was over. The sea had spoken, and the village would never forget.